Lila Harper stood at the entrance of her father's new home, a modern two-story house nestled in the heart of Portland, Oregon. The scent of fresh paint and new wood filled the air, mingling with the earthy aroma of rain-soaked streets. It was summer, and while most of her friends were off on adventures, she had returned home for a break from college. But this wasn't the home she remembered. It felt foreign, like a stage set for a play she didn't want to be part of. Her father, Derek, had married Maya just over a year ago. Lila had been skeptical from the start. Maya was charming and graceful, with an effortless smile that could light up a room. But to Lila, she was still an intruder in her family, a woman who had stepped into her mother's shoes far too quickly. As she took a deep breath and stepped inside, Lila felt a wave of conflicting emotions wash over her. The living room was bright and airy, filled with chic furniture and vibrant artwork that Maya had curated. Lila's eyes wandered to a large canvas hanging above the fireplace. It was an abstract piece that seemed to pulse with energy. She couldn't help but admire Maya's taste, even if it felt like an invasion of her childhood space. "Lila, you made it." Derek's voice boomed from the kitchen, pulling her from her thoughts. He appeared in the doorway, his face lighting up with joy. "I'm so glad you're home." "Hey, Dad," Lila replied, forcing a smile as she dropped her duffel bag by the stairs. She could hear the clinking of dishes and the soft hum of music coming from the kitchen. "What's cooking?" "Just some pasta, your favorite." "Maya helped me out," he said proudly. Lila's heart sank at the mention of Maya. She had always loved her father's cooking, but now it felt tainted by the presence of his new wife. "Great," she said flatly. As they walked into the kitchen together, Lila found Maya stirring a pot on the stove. She looked up and smiled warmly, but Lila could see a flicker of uncertainty in her eyes. "Welcome home, Lila," Maya said cheerfully. "I hope you're hungry." "Starving," Lila replied, trying to keep her tone neutral as she avoided eye contact. The tension in the air was palpable. She could sense that both women were feeling it but were too polite to acknowledge it. Dinner was filled with small talk and laughter that felt forced on Lila's part. Derek was animated as he recounted stories from his work, while Maya chimed in with anecdotes about their recent trips together. Lila picked at her food, nodding along but feeling increasingly isolated in this new family dynamic. After dinner, Lila excused herself to her room under the pretense of unpacking. She needed space to breathe and process everything swirling in her mind. Her bedroom still held remnants of her childhood, posters on the walls, books stacked haphazardly on shelves, but it felt different now. It was like stepping into a museum where everything was familiar yet strangely distant. As she sat on her bed, Lila thought about how quickly everything had changed. One moment she had been living with both parents, now she was navigating life with a stepmother who seemed determined to befriend her while also trying to carve out her own place in their lives. Later that night, after everyone had settled down for bed, Lila found herself staring out of her window at the city lights twinkling against the dark sky. She thought about how much she missed her old life, the simplicity of it all, and how difficult it would be to adjust to this new reality. Just then, there was a soft knock at her door. It creaked open slowly to reveal Maya standing there, looking tentative yet hopeful. "Hey," Maya said softly. "I just wanted to check in on you." Lila hesitated before responding. "I'm fine," she said curtly. Maya stepped inside anyway and leaned against the doorframe, folding her arms across her chest as if trying to shield herself from rejection. "I know this is all new for you, I just want you to know that I'm here if you need anything." Lila met Maya's gaze for a brief moment before looking away again. The sincerity in Maya's voice caught her off guard. It was hard not to feel some empathy for this woman who was trying so hard to make things work. "I appreciate that," Lila replied quietly after a pause. Maya smiled gently, clearly relieved by Lila's response. "I know we're still figuring things out, but I hope we can be friends." "Yeah, maybe," Lila said noncommittally. Maya nodded slowly and turned to leave but paused at the door. "Good night, Lila." "Good night," Lila echoed softly as she watched Maya walk away. As silence enveloped her room once more, Lila felt an unexpected pang of longing mixed with confusion. Perhaps this summer would be more complicated than she had anticipated, filled with emotions she wasn't ready to confront yet. The days passed, and the initial awkwardness between Lila and Maya began to shift, like the changing tides of the ocean. Lila found herself spending more time at home, her art supplies sprawled across the dining table as she immersed herself in her sketches. The vibrant colors of Portland's summer, the lush greens of the trees, the bright blooms of flowers provided endless inspiration. But it was the unexpected moments with Maya that truly captured her attention. One afternoon, while Lila was working on a piece inspired by the city's skyline, she heard footsteps approaching. She looked up to see Maya standing in the doorway, a curious smile on her face. "What are you working on?" she asked, her tone light and inviting. "It's just a sketch," Lila replied, feeling a mix of pride and vulnerability. She hesitated before turning the sketchpad toward Maya. "It's not finished yet." Maya stepped closer, peering at the lines and shapes that formed a rough outline of the city. "I love it. You have such a unique style," she said, genuinely impressed. "You capture movement so well." Lila felt a warmth spread through her at Maya's compliment. "Thanks," she said, trying to sound casual. "I'm still figuring it out." "Art is all about exploration," Maya replied, her eyes sparkling with enthusiasm. "Why don't we go to that new art gallery downtown? I think you'd love it." Lila hesitated for a moment. The idea of spending more time with Maya made her heart race, partly from excitement and partly from anxiety. But there was something in Maya's expression that made it hard to say no. "Sure, why not?" she finally agreed. Later that day, they set off together in Maya's sleek car, the sun shining brightly above them. The drive was filled with easy conversation. They talked about their favorite artists and shared stories from their lives. Lila found herself laughing more than she expected, her earlier reservations fading away like morning mist. When they arrived at the gallery, Lila was immediately captivated by the vibrant displays of contemporary art. Each piece seemed to tell a story, echoing her own feelings of confusion and longing. As they wandered through the exhibits, Lila felt a sense of freedom. For the first time in weeks, she could forget about her complicated family dynamics and simply enjoy being in the moment. Maya stood beside her as they admired an abstract painting splashed with bold colors. "What do you see in this one?" Maya asked, tilting her head slightly as she studied Lila's reaction. Lila took a moment to consider it. "It feels chaotic but also kind of beautiful," she said slowly. "Like there's a struggle happening but also hope." Maya nodded thoughtfully. "That's a great interpretation. Art is so personal, everyone sees something different." There was a pause before she added softly, "I see hope too." Their eyes met for a moment longer than necessary, and Lila felt a flutter in her stomach, a mix of admiration and something deeper that she couldn't quite name yet. As they continued exploring, they stumbled upon an interactive installation that encouraged visitors to express themselves through paint and words on large canvases. Without thinking twice, Maya grabbed Lila's hand and pulled her toward it. "Let's do this," Maya exclaimed with infectious enthusiasm. Lila laughed as they approached the canvas together. They took turns splattering paint and writing words that represented their feelings: freedom, love, confusion, each stroke becoming an extension of their unspoken bond. As they painted side by side, Lila couldn't help but notice how easily they connected, how Maya's laughter seemed to resonate within her heart like music. It was exhilarating yet terrifying to feel such warmth toward someone who had once felt like an intruder in her life. After they finished their masterpiece, a chaotic blend of colors and emotions, they stepped back to admire their work. It was messy but full of life. It felt like a reflection of their journey thus far. "Look at what we created," Maya said breathlessly, her eyes shining with joy. "It's kind of amazing," Lila admitted, feeling a rush of pride swell within her. As they left the gallery later that afternoon, Lila felt lighter somehow, like she had shed some weight she didn't even know she was carrying. The sun was beginning to set, casting golden rays across the cityscape as they walked back to the car. "Thank you for today," Lila said sincerely as they reached the vehicle. Maya smiled warmly at her. "I had so much fun. We should do this more often." There was an earnestness in her voice that made Lila's heart skip a beat. "Definitely," Lila replied, surprised by how much she meant it. As they drove home through the vibrant streets of Portland, Lila couldn't shake off the feeling that something significant was blossoming between them, a connection that transcended their roles as stepmother and stepdaughter. That night, as Lila lay in bed staring at the ceiling, thoughts raced through her mind like wildfire. She replayed moments from their day, the laughter shared over paint-splattered canvases and those lingering glances that seemed to hold unspoken promises. For the first time since returning home, Lila felt hopeful about what lay ahead, a summer filled with possibilities and perhaps even love in its most unexpected form. The summer days in Portland drifted by like the gentle flow of the Willamette River, each one blurring into the next as Lila and Maya grew closer. Their bond deepened through shared moments, long talks over coffee, spontaneous trips to local markets, and evenings spent painting together in the backyard. Lila found herself looking forward to each day, her heart fluttering with anticipation whenever she thought about Maya. One particularly warm afternoon, Lila was sprawled on the living room floor, surrounded by her sketches and art supplies. The sunlight streamed through the large windows, casting a golden hue over everything. She was lost in thought, trying to capture the essence of a blooming flower when Maya walked in, holding a tray of freshly baked cookies. "Hey there, artist," Maya said cheerfully, setting the tray down beside Lila. "I thought you might need a little fuel." Lila looked up, her eyes widening at the sight of the warm chocolate chip cookies. "Wow, these look amazing," she exclaimed, reaching for one. Maya laughed softly as she watched Lila take a big bite. "I'm glad you like them. Baking is one of my favorite ways to unwind." As they shared cookies and laughter, Lila felt a sense of ease that she hadn't experienced before. It was as if the barriers between them had dissolved completely. "You know," Lila said between bites, "I never thought I'd get along with my stepmother this well." Maya raised an eyebrow playfully. "You mean you didn't expect to like me at all?" Lila chuckled, her cheeks warming slightly. "Okay, maybe I had some preconceived notions. But you've surprised me." Maya smiled knowingly. "I understand how you feel. It's not easy blending families. I just want you to know that I'm here for you." Their eyes locked for a moment, and Lila felt a rush of emotions that made her heart race. She quickly looked away, focusing on her sketches instead. The air between them felt charged with something unspoken, a tension that both excited and terrified her. As the days continued to unfold, Lila found herself increasingly drawn to Maya in ways she hadn't anticipated. They would spend hours talking about their dreams and fears, their conversations often drifting into deeper territory as they shared personal stories from their pasts. One evening, while they were sitting on the porch watching the sunset paint the sky in shades of pink and orange, Maya turned to Lila with a serious expression. "What about your mom?" she asked gently. Lila's heart sank at the mention of her mother. It was a topic she had avoided discussing since returning home. I miss her," Lila admitted quietly, her voice barely above a whisper. Maya nodded thoughtfully. "It's okay to miss her. Losing someone is never easy." Lila took a deep breath, feeling vulnerable but grateful for Maya's understanding. "It's just hard sometimes," she confessed. "I feel like I'm supposed to be happy for you and Dad, but part of me still resents everything that happened." Maya reached out and placed a comforting hand on Lila's shoulder. "You don't have to choose between loving your dad and missing your mom," she said softly. "It's okay to hold both feelings at once." Tears prickled at Lila's eyes as she absorbed Maya's words. It was refreshing to hear someone acknowledge her pain without judgment. In that moment, she realized how much Maya truly cared for her, not just as a stepmother but as an ally. As their conversation continued under the fading light of dusk, Lila felt walls crumbling within her heart, walls she hadn't even known were there. The next day brought an unexpected turn of events when Derek announced he had planned a weekend getaway for the three of them, a trip to the Oregon coast where they could relax and bond as a family. Lila felt a mix of excitement and apprehension. While she loved the idea of spending time with Maya away from home, it also meant facing new dynamics in an unfamiliar setting. On the drive to the coast, laughter filled the car as Derek played his favorite classic rock tunes from the radio while Maya chimed in with lyrics and anecdotes from her youth. Lila sat in the backseat, watching them interact with a sense of wonder, how easily they fit together as if they had been a family for years rather than just months. When they arrived at their beachside cottage, Lila was immediately enchanted by the sound of crashing waves and the salty breeze that danced through her hair. It felt liberating to be away from home and its associated tensions. After settling in, they headed down to the beach where golden sand stretched endlessly before them. Derek grabbed a frisbee from the car trunk and challenged both women to a game. Lila laughed as she ran after it, feeling carefree for perhaps the first time since arriving back home. The sun warmed her skin as she threw herself into playfulness, dodging waves and giggling uncontrollably whenever Derek teased them about their throwing skills. Later that evening, after dinner on their porch overlooking the ocean, Derek suggested they share stories around a bonfire on the beach. As they gathered around the flickering flames under a canopy of stars, Lila felt an overwhelming sense of belonging wash over her. They shared silly childhood stories, Derek reminiscing about his own awkward teenage years while Maya recounted hilarious mishaps from her college days. Then it was Lila's turn. She hesitated but decided to share an anecdote from art school about how she once accidentally spilled paint all over herself during an important presentation. The laughter that erupted made her feel lighter than air. As night deepened around them and laughter echoed into the darkness, Maya turned to Lila with an earnest look in her eyes. "You're really talented," she said softly. "You have such a unique perspective on life." Lila felt warmth spread through her chest at Maya's compliment. It was more than just praise, it felt like recognition from someone who truly understood her passion. "Thanks," Lila replied shyly but sincerely. As they sat together by the fire, something shifted in Lila's heart, a realization that this summer was not just about navigating new family dynamics but also about discovering new aspects of herself, including feelings for Maya that were becoming harder to ignore. That night as she lay in bed listening to the soothing sound of waves crashing against the shore outside her window, Lila couldn't shake off thoughts of Maya, the way she laughed so freely or how effortlessly they connected during their conversations. For once in her life, everything felt right, even if it was complicated, and maybe just maybe love could blossom in unexpected places. The days at the coast flew by, filled with laughter, exploration, and an undeniable connection that Lila and Maya were both beginning to acknowledge but not fully understand. Each moment spent together felt like a thread weaving them closer, yet the weight of their circumstances loomed in the background, casting shadows over their budding relationship. On the last evening of their trip, Lila stood on the beach, watching the sun dip below the horizon, painting the sky in hues of orange and purple. The waves lapped gently at her feet, and she felt a sense of peace wash over her. But as she turned to head back to the cottage, she spotted Maya sitting alone on a log, gazing out at the ocean with a contemplative expression. "Hey," Lila called softly as she approached. "Mind if I join you?" Maya looked up and smiled, her eyes reflecting the colors of the sunset. "Of course not. It's beautiful here, isn't it?" "Yeah," Lila replied, taking a seat beside her. The warmth of Maya's presence was comforting, yet it stirred something deeper within Lila, a mix of admiration and longing. They sat in silence for a moment, both lost in their thoughts. Finally, Maya broke the quiet. "You know, I've really enjoyed this trip," she said, her voice soft but steady. "It's been nice to spend time together without any distractions." Lila nodded, feeling a flutter in her chest. "Me too. I didn't expect to have so much fun." Maya turned to face her fully. "I know things have been complicated since I married your dad, but I hope you know that I care about you." "I appreciate that," Lila replied, her heart racing. "I care about you too." The words hung in the air between them, charged with unspoken emotions. Lila felt a rush of vulnerability as she met Maya's gaze. There was something electric in that moment, an acknowledgement of feelings that had been simmering beneath the surface for weeks. Just then, Derek's voice called out from the cottage, breaking the spell. "Dinner's ready. Come on." Lila and Maya exchanged glances before standing up and heading back together. The atmosphere was lighter now, but Lila couldn't shake off the intensity of their earlier conversation. That night at dinner, they shared stories and laughter over grilled fish and fresh vegetables while Derek animatedly talked about his plans for their next family adventure. Lila found herself smiling at her father's enthusiasm but couldn't help feeling a bittersweet tug in her heart. She was caught between two worlds, her love for her father and her growing feelings for Maya. After dinner, they returned to the beach for one last bonfire under the stars. As they settled around the fire with marshmallows and chocolate for s'mores, Lila noticed Maya stealing glances at her when she thought no one was watching. Each glance sent butterflies fluttering in Lila's stomach. As they toasted marshmallows over the flames, Derek recounted tales from his childhood, stories filled with mischief and adventure that made both women laugh until their sides hurt. But amidst the laughter, Lila felt a tension building inside her. It was as if she were teetering on the edge of something profound. When Derek excused himself to grab more supplies from the cottage, Maya turned to Lila with a serious expression. "Can we talk?" Lila's heart raced as she nodded. They moved away from the firelight into the shadows where they could speak privately. "What is it?" Lila asked cautiously. Maya took a deep breath, her eyes searching Lila's face for understanding. "I've been thinking about us, about everything that's happened this summer." Lila held her breath as anticipation swirled within her. "Me too," she admitted finally. Maya stepped closer, lowering her voice as if afraid someone might overhear them. "I know this is complicated, but I can't help how I feel about you." Lila's heart soared at Maya's confession. It felt like a weight had been lifted off her shoulders. "I feel it too," she whispered back. Maya reached out tentatively and brushed her fingers against Lila's hand, a simple touch that sent electricity coursing through Lila's veins. "What does this mean for us?" Maya asked softly. "I don't know," Lila replied honestly, feeling both exhilarated and terrified by what lay ahead. "But I want to explore it, if you do." Maya smiled, a radiant smile that lit up her face even in the dim light of dusk. "I do," she said firmly. Just then, Derek returned with an armful of supplies and interrupted their moment without realizing it. "What are you two whispering about?" he asked playfully. "Just girl talk," Maya replied quickly, stepping back from Lila as if nothing had happened. Lila felt a pang of disappointment but quickly masked it with a smile as they resumed their positions around the fire. The warmth of the flames flickered against their faces while laughter filled the air once more. As they finished their s'mores under a blanket of stars, Lila couldn't shake off the feeling that everything was about to change, that this summer would mark a turning point in her life. Back at their cottage later that night, as Lila lay in bed staring up at the ceiling once more, thoughts raced through her mind like wild horses galloping across an open field. She replayed every moment shared with Maya, the laughter, the glances, and especially that brief touch that had ignited something deep within her soul. But just as excitement bubbled within her heart, so did fear, the fear of what this meant for their family dynamic and how Derek would react if he ever found out about their feelings for each other. With those thoughts swirling through her mind like waves crashing against rocks on the shore outside, sleep eluded her as she pondered what tomorrow would bring. The next morning dawned bright and clear, the sun spilling golden light across the beach and warming the air. Lila awoke with a mix of excitement and anxiety swirling in her chest. Last night's conversation with Maya replayed in her mind like a favorite song, each note resonating with the promise of something new yet terrifying. After a quick breakfast, Derek suggested they spend the day exploring the nearby tide pools. Lila's heart raced at the thought of being alone with Maya, but she pushed her feelings aside, determined to enjoy the family outing. They packed a picnic lunch and set off, laughter echoing as they walked along the sandy path. As they reached the rocky shore, Lila felt a rush of exhilaration. The tide pools were alive with color, anemones swaying gently in the water, starfish clinging to rocks, and tiny crabs scuttling about. Derek knelt down to examine a particularly vibrant sea creature, his enthusiasm infectious. "Look at this little guy," he exclaimed, pointing at a bright orange starfish. "Can you believe how beautiful nature is?" Maya joined him, her eyes sparkling with delight. "It's amazing. Nature has its own way of creating art," she said, glancing at Lila with a knowing smile. Lila felt a warmth spread through her at Maya's words. Art had always been her refuge, and now it seemed to connect her to Maya in a deeper way than she had ever anticipated. As they explored the tide pools together, Lila found herself gravitating toward Maya, their shoulders brushing occasionally as they moved from one pool to another. At one point, while Derek was distracted by a particularly large crab, Maya leaned closer to Lila and whispered, "Can we talk later? I want to discuss everything." Lila nodded, her heart pounding in anticipation. The moment felt charged with possibility as they shared a brief glance filled with unspoken understanding. After an hour or so of exploring, they settled on a flat rock for their picnic lunch. The salty breeze tousled their hair as they spread out sandwiches and fruit. Lila watched as Derek animatedly recounted stories from his childhood trips to the coast, but her mind was elsewhere, focused on the conversation she would have with Maya later. Once lunch was over and their bellies were full, Derek suggested they take a walk along the beach while waiting for the tide to recede. As they strolled along the shore, Lila felt an overwhelming urge to reach out and take Maya's hand but held back, unsure of how to navigate this new territory. Eventually, Derek wandered ahead to collect seashells while Lila and Maya lingered behind. The sound of waves crashing against the shore filled the air as they walked side by side in comfortable silence. Maya, Lila began hesitantly, about last night. Maya stopped walking and turned to face her fully. I've been thinking about it too, she admitted softly. I know this is complicated, but I can't help how I feel about you. Lila's heart raced at Maya's words. It felt like validation for all the emotions she had been grappling with since their connection had deepened. I feel it too, she said earnestly. But what does this mean for us? For Dad? Maya took a deep breath, her expression serious yet tender. I don't want to hide what we have, but I also don't want to hurt anyone. It's important that we figure this out together. Just then, Derek called out from further down the beach, holding up a beautifully spiraled shell triumphantly. Hey, check this out. Lila and Maya exchanged glances that spoke volumes, an understanding that their conversation would have to wait but that it was far from over. Later that evening back at the cottage, after dinner had been cleared away and Derek settled in front of the television with a movie, Lila found herself restless. She needed to talk to Maya, needed to explore what lay between them without interruptions. Can we go outside for a minute? Lila asked quietly when she caught Maya's eye across the room. Maya nodded and followed her outside into the cool night air. The stars twinkled overhead like diamonds scattered across velvet fabric as they stepped onto the porch. I feel like we're on borrowed time, Lila said urgently once they were alone. Every moment we spend together feels so precious yet so risky. Maya leaned against the railing, looking out at the ocean under moonlight. I know, she replied softly. But I can't deny what I feel for you anymore. Lila stepped closer, drawn by an invisible force that seemed to bind them together despite everything else happening around them. What if Dad finds out? She asked nervously. We'll figure it out, Maya said confidently but gently. I care about you too much to let fear dictate our relationship. In that moment of vulnerability between them, Lila felt an overwhelming urge to close the distance that separated them physically and emotionally. She reached out tentatively and took Maya's hand in hers, a simple gesture that sent shivers down her spine. Maya looked down at their intertwined fingers before meeting Lila's gaze again. There was something electric in that moment, a shared understanding that transcended words. Let's take it one step at a time, Lila suggested softly. Together, Maya affirmed, squeezing Lila's hand gently. As they stood there under the stars, hands clasped tightly, the weight of their feelings settled around them like a warm blanket. In that moment of connection, everything else faded away, the fear of judgment, the complications of family dynamics, and all that remained was an undeniable bond. Forged through honesty and vulnerability. But just as hope began to blossom within them like wildflowers breaking through concrete cracks, Derek stepped outside unexpectedly with a puzzled expression on his face. What are you two doing out here? He asked innocently. Lila's heart dropped as she quickly let go of Maya's hand and stepped back slightly. Just talking, she replied too quickly. Derek raised an eyebrow but smiled nonetheless. Well, come inside. The movie is starting. As they rejoined him inside the cottage, Lila felt a mix of relief and disappointment wash over her. Their moment had been interrupted before it could truly begin. But deep down, she knew this wasn't over, not by a long shot. That night as she lay in bed staring up at the ceiling once more, thoughts swirling like leaves caught in an autumn breeze, Lila realized one thing: whatever lay ahead would be worth fighting for, even if it meant navigating uncharted waters filled with uncertainty. The next morning, the sun rose over the Oregon coast, casting a warm glow that filtered through the window of the cottage. Lila lay in bed, her heart still racing from the previous night's events. The memory of holding Maya's hand lingered in her mind like a sweet melody, but it was accompanied by the nagging worry of what would happen next. After breakfast, Derek suggested they take a hike along the coastal cliffs. Lila felt a mix of excitement and dread. While she loved spending time with her father, she also knew that being out in nature meant more opportunities for quiet moments with Maya, moments that could lead to more complicated conversations. As they walked along the rugged trail, Lila felt the fresh sea breeze against her skin, invigorating her spirit. Derek chatted animatedly about the views and wildlife, but Lila's mind was elsewhere. She stole glances at Maya, who walked beside her, a serene smile on her face as she took in the beauty around them. Eventually, they reached a breathtaking overlook where the cliffs met the crashing waves below. Derek pulled out his camera to capture the moment, urging Lila and Maya to pose together. As they stood side by side, Lila felt a rush of warmth and connection that made her heart flutter. "Say, cheese," Derek called out as he snapped a picture. Lila turned to Maya and smiled genuinely, feeling their shoulders brush together, a simple touch that sent sparks through her. In that moment, everything else faded away. It was just the two of them against the backdrop of endless ocean and sky. After Derek finished taking pictures, he wandered off to explore a nearby path, leaving Lila and Maya alone for a brief moment. The air was thick with unspoken words as they stood side by side, gazing out at the horizon. "I've been thinking," Maya began cautiously, breaking the silence, "about how we can navigate this, whatever this is between us." Lila's heart raced at Maya's words. "I want to be honest with Dad," she said earnestly. "But I'm scared of how he'll react." Maya nodded thoughtfully. "I understand. But I think it's important that we don't hide who we are from him. He deserves to know. But what if he doesn't accept it?" Lila asked, anxiety creeping into her voice. "Then we'll deal with it together," Maya replied firmly but gently. "I care about you too much to keep this a secret." Lila took a deep breath, feeling both terrified and exhilarated at the thought of being open about their feelings. "You're right," she said finally. "I want to be honest too." Just then, Derek returned with a beaming smile on his face. "You two look so serious. What are you plotting?" he teased. Lila exchanged a quick glance with Maya before forcing a smile. "Just admiring the view," she replied lightly. As they continued their hike back down the trail, Lila felt a sense of determination growing within her. She knew they couldn't keep living in shadows. It was time to face their feelings head-on. Later that evening, after dinner and a long day filled with laughter and stories, Lila found herself sitting on the porch with Maya once more. The stars twinkled overhead like tiny diamonds scattered across black velvet. "Can we talk?" Lila asked softly, her heart pounding in her chest. Maya nodded, her expression serious yet encouraging. "I think we should tell Dad how we feel about each other," Lila said, her voice steady despite her nerves. "I don't want to hide anymore." Maya's eyes lit up with relief and admiration. "I'm proud of you for saying that," she said softly. "I feel the same way." "Let's do it tomorrow," Lila suggested, feeling both exhilarated and terrified at the prospect. "Okay," Maya agreed, squeezing Lila's hand gently, a reassuring gesture that calmed Lila's racing heart. That night as they lay in their respective beds, Lila staring at the ceiling while thoughts swirled around in her mind, she felt an overwhelming sense of hope mixed with fear. Tomorrow would change everything. The next morning arrived too quickly for Lila's liking. She awoke feeling both anxious and determined. After breakfast, she found herself pacing nervously while Derek watched TV in the living room. "Are you okay?" he asked casually, glancing up at her. "Yeah, just thinking," Lila replied, trying to sound casual but knowing he could see through her facade. Finally, after what felt like an eternity of hesitation, she turned to Maya, who was sitting quietly beside her on the couch. "Are you ready?" she whispered. Maya nodded resolutely but looked equally nervous. "Dad," Lila called out as she approached him. He turned his attention away from the screen and looked at both women curiously. "Yes. We need to talk," Lila said firmly but gently. Derek set down his remote control and gave them his full attention, his expression shifting from curiosity to concern as he sensed the seriousness in their voices. "What's going on?" he asked slowly. Lila exchanged a glance with Maya before taking a deep breath and stepping forward slightly. Maya and we've developed feelings for each other, she said finally, each word feeling like both liberation and weight all at once. Derek blinked in surprise. For a moment there was silence as he processed what he had just heard. Feelings, he repeated slowly. Yes, Maya interjected gently but firmly. We care about each other deeply. Derek's expression shifted from surprise to confusion as he tried to comprehend what this meant for their family dynamic. But, you're my wife and my daughter. I know this is complicated, Lila said quickly before he could finish his thought. But I want you to understand that this is real for us. Derek sat back in his chair, running a hand through his hair as he struggled to find words. I need some time to process this, he finally admitted after several moments of silence. Lila felt a pang of disappointment but also relief. At least they had been honest about their feelings instead of hiding them away like secrets. We're not asking you to accept it right away, Maya added softly but firmly. We just wanted you to know. Derek nodded slowly but remained silent as he stared off into space, lost in thought. As they left him alone to process their revelation, Lila felt an overwhelming mix of emotions. Fear about how this would change everything but also hope that honesty might lead them toward understanding rather than division. Later that evening, after dinner had been cleared away and Derek had retreated into his study for some solitude, Lila found herself sitting outside on the porch steps staring up at the stars once more alongside Maya, who sat quietly beside her, lost in thought too. What do you think will happen now? Lila asked quietly, breaking their silence after several minutes passed between them, filled only by gentle night sounds surrounding them, the rustling leaves whispering secrets above them while waves crashed rhythmically against distant shores below them, echoing life itself around them endlessly without end or beginning, ever truly defined by time alone. I don't know, Maya replied honestly after pausing briefly, gathering courage before finally speaking again, softly yet resolutely, filled with conviction despite uncertainty lingering just beneath surface layers, waiting patiently for answers yet unknown, still shrouded behind veils obscured from sight, waiting patiently until revealed when time deemed appropriate, revealing truths hidden deep within hearts yearning, desperately seeking light, illuminating paths forward, leading toward brighter tomorrows, filled possibilities beyond imagination itself, unfolding gradually, step by step, journeying together hand in hand, navigating uncharted waters ahead. As night deepened around them, enveloping everything within its embrace, Lila felt something shift inside her, a sense of calmness settling over everything surrounding them like warm blankets wrapping tightly around souls intertwined, forever bound together through love, transcending barriers built long ago, breaking free, finally allowing light shine brightly, illuminating paths forward, leading toward brighter tomorrows, filled possibilities beyond imagination itself, unfolding gradually, step by step, journeying together hand in hand, navigating uncharted waters ahead.